Next up is Christine Corbett from Open Whisper Systems talking about TextSecure and RedPhone.
Hi, thank you, and I'm pleased to be here today. I lived in Zurich in Switzerland for the past 6 years and only recently moved to the US again, where I'm originally from, so it's good to be back in Europe. Today I'm going to focus on how to really mess with surveillance as a default. That sounds kind of provocative. There's going to be two halves of the talk. In the first half, it'll be a little bit more philosophical, and in the second half, we're going to go straight into some of our protocols. I'm going to focus on TextSecure versus RedPhone, and just a little bit of background about Open Whisper Systems. Whisper Systems, as opposed to Open Whisper Systems, was founded by Moxie Marlinspike in about 2009 and provided security applications for the Android community, including RedPhone, secure calling, and TextSecure, secure messaging. Moxie briefly joined Twitter, and then about a year later was able to take all of the original code that comprise RedPhone and TextSecure away from Twitter, open source it. Now we are Open Whisper Systems, and we're a collective of about 9 dedicated developers and a huge open source community, focusing on bringing secure messaging, secure communications cross-platform and to the masses. So as I said, the first part will be a little bit more philosophical, and you may remember about 2 years ago, Edward Snowden's leaked NSA documents led to the first expose of mass surveillance in detail. This is something that many of us in the community expected, but this really brought it to the forefront of the international consciousness. Of about 2,500 pages already released out of hundreds of thousands, there's systematic inconsistencies with public government claims. Now, here in this half of the talk, I'm going to use this kind of general they. They is often a governmental agency. They is sometimes us. The point with using this kind of provocative they is that it's something that's sort of out of our control. Even if I personally were able to observe a large portion of international traffic, I couldn't guarantee that it would be just me for any length of time. So I use as a system that's out of any one person's control. So they are able to observe a large portion of international traffic through domestic fibers and partners. Of the traffic they collect, a vast quantity of this, you can see that on the right, is instant messages or ephemeral communications. And you can see as well that a percentage of this interception was actually NSA targets, and then you can ask, well, what percentage of that were legitimate targets? But the vast majority of communications were innocent bystanders or non-targets. So they do have connections and resources that give them access to the great modern motherlodes of the internet. Most people on the planet who have access to the internet use one of these services. Facebook, for example, has 1.3 billion active users, 18% of the world's population, about half of the world's internet population. And in terms of messaging, iMessages has 500 million users. And WhatsApp is 600 million, also Facebook owned. And here we have Gmail, anywhere estimated from 550 to 800 million active users, 10% of the world's population, 30% of the internet population. So this is kind of a spoiler alert to the rest of the talk, the second half of the talk, that we can actually make such interceptions much harder. For example, with WhatsApp, your WhatsApp messages may already be encrypted. This week at Whisper Systems, Open Whisper Systems, we were able to publicly announce a partnership that has been in the works for a while to implement our axolotl encrypted messaging protocol on WhatsApp, and that rollout actually went out silently without anyone knowing it. And that is part of our philosophy about usable crypto. The crypto was so usable that no one noticed that their iMessages on Android are likely already encrypted. So even though we're still at the beginning of this rollout, we believe that this already represents the largest deployment of end-to-end encrypted communications in human history, which is kind of crazy and exciting. And part of what we're trying to bring, that surveillance will not be the default, encryption will be the default, and to surveil, great effort will have to be taken. So more can be found about this rollout at our blog post. So they do enjoy looking at naked pictures of you. There's even a term in the intelligence community in the US called LoveInt. And I read this article here, and it said that most of the cases were self-reported via polygraphs, which leads you to wonder, they seem to assume those were the only cases, were the self-reported cases, as opposed to, I would assume that self-reported offenses would be a small fraction. So that's just one example of mass surveillance being grossly misused, in addition to the fact that the majority of such surveillance is actually innocent bystanders. There's a lot more that's wrong with this picture, but just to reiterate, they are fallible. We can become they, but they cannot be kept to just one community. If you introduce a backdoor, you can't be guaranteed that only you can walk through that backdoor. They're humans. They is kind of an othering term, but they're in a big bureaucratic labyrinth. Stuxnet, for example, managed to collect data in amounts that surprised even the moderately paranoid person. They still have pretty bad OPSEC. Modernization plans are constantly put off as an ever-increasing flood of information that the NSA is forever trying to get under control. So that's just to say that if you design a system such that surveillance is a default, you're putting this kind of information in this bureaucratic labyrinth that you cannot predict what's going to come out of it. We saw in the previous talk some standardization efforts, but again, modernization plans are constantly put off or downsized. They also don't seem to have broken the mathematical assumptions of modern cryptography. I obviously don't work for the NSA. I do have a background in mathematics, but the basic discrete logarithmic primitives still seem hard. RSA, elliptic curve cryptography, modern recommended standards still seem hard. And even if it were the case that some of these were broken at some level, evidence shows that they tend towards very low-hanging fruit. And by just moving the majority of the fruit, say 599.9 million of the people higher than this, will prevent quite a lot of default surveillance. What they have done is attacked standardization procedures and getting good crypto ubiquitously implemented. So something such as making what is, in some sense, a mathematically solved problem, a socially solved problem. For example, this elliptic curve random number generator that had a backdoor built in, opposition to constant time implementations and higher key strength, poisoning the well with doubt of non-standard crypto, and slowing the phase out of broken crypto. The NSA loves human error, and I'm sure intelligence agencies all around the world do. Our minds are the NSA's or intelligence's favorite broken security system. The low-hanging fruit is us, because through our own free will, we've opted for convenience. Half the internet will be active on Facebook this month, and convenience and security are rarely uttered in the same breath. I just did, and we at Open Whisper Systems try to as often as possible. Most people do care about privacy. I think it's very easy to get disillusioned in the security community, that people just don't care. Well, people are us, and we do care, but it's one factor. And for many in the security community, it's a primary factor. For most human beings, it's a larger equation when deciding to participate in activities. And social pressures typically prove to be stronger. And so again, this is more about the question of what is the default. So by making the default secure, the social pressures can be, about whether to use this messaging system. Europe uses WhatsApp. The US probably uses iMessages/texting instead. When I travel in Asia, they're using Line, et cetera. It can be the social pressures around that. But if the default, whatever your choice is secure, then you can make the decision without having to know a lot about the underlying cryptographic primitives, and most people will therefore make the right decision. So companies, one thing that we've seen in the last couple of years is that companies are beginning to lay lip service, at the very least, to privacy, but they kind of privacy wash things. I think we've heard of greenwashing some people, where you can make something sound very environmentally friendly even if it's not. So I personally believe in mathematically backed statements, which would be something like, we can't look at your messages. That is a statement that makes sense to me, versus we won't look at your messages, which is something that sounds sort of privacy preserving, but the fact is won't cannot be a guarantee for any company, for any person. So we can in fact make it impossible or very difficult, at the very least, to look at your messages. Surveillance is very intentionally abstract and intangible. People are not that good at long-term risk. This is a cute little plot here. So on the y-axis, we have how concerned the population is about global warming, and on the x-axis, we have the average temperature in July. So this is a long-term risk. How much is the planet going to warm in 100 years versus how hot it is in a particular month? So we can only worry about so much at once. We in the community say we care about privacy, and we put a lot of effort into crypto for the people. But the mass populace doesn't use most of these tools. I would say even myself, it's very difficult to be motivated to communicate via PGP continuously when the majority of the population, it's an onerous thing. It's not integrated into the tools that everyday people are using. Training is required to use most of our crypto systems without shooting yourself in the foot. And I would say if you've ever done any technical support for a friend or relative, people are really worried about doing the wrong thing, so much so that they often would rather take no action than have the potential of doing the wrong thing. And with most of our tools, the potential to do the wrong thing is fairly large. And that's scary to people who aren't used to making mistakes and recovering from those mistakes and having fun throughout that process. They're used to, when they make a mistake, being blamed for being stupid, for doing things incorrectly. And so they would rather take inaction versus potentially making a mistake, even if potentially making a mistake is the better course. So it's very important for us to make it comfortable for people to be able to use tools without worrying that they're going to use them incorrectly. It also is a lifestyle change compared to if you want to communicate only securely via email, that really requires your entire network take a lifestyle change along with you. It's a bit like, I'm vegan, for example, but I went vegan, and there we go, there's a vegan in the audience. I went vegan, and I can still go out to dinner with my friends, and my friends can eat meat, and I cannot eat meat. If I decide to go privacy vegan, I can't even arrange that dinner with my friends unless they all use PGP. So it really, it's a next level lifestyle change in which it's not only something that you yourself have to make, it's you and your entire network. There's a lot of you're on your own. We have software technologies to solve things, but even something as conceptually simple as key management is quite difficult in practice to prevent compromise. There's friction at every level. It's all high cognitive load. So in addition, most of us would like to use communication as a tool to get things done, not be bogged down by communication as our only point in life. PGP does have some advantages. It works in asynchronous environments. It lacks future-forward secrecy, it lacks deniability, has fairly complicated setup and usage. Modern email clients often have a little tutorial that you can go ahead and set things up with a suite of tools, but most people, the majority of the people we saw from the Gmail stats are accessing these sort of tools via webmail, via their phones, and if webmail and the phone don't actively support things, it's a setup and usage. So here's a little example. Let me just go back to the keys. So Alice has a private public key pair, Bob has a private public key pair, we have Eve, who's eavesdropping on the conversation. You can see her little devil horns here. If at some point Eve gets Bob's key via bugging him enough, stealing his stuff, torturing him, whatever means she used. The game's kind of up from that point forward. OTR, so if you're not familiar with that, off-the-record communications protocol used by many chat clients. It does have forward secrecy via ratcheting ephemeral key exchange. There are fewer ways to shoot yourself in the foot. It is, however, synchronous. It's still unsupported on most chat clients. And it does require some security, tribal knowledge, keys, fingerprints. If you ask the average user of software on the planet, which by this time it's mobile software, what they think a key or a fingerprint might be, it's actually a pretty scary and unintelligible concept. So by exposing any of that to the user at the forefront, it is something that is kind of breaking that abstraction level about crypto that just works under the hood without the user having to know how it's working. So what do we need? In our opinion, at OpenWhisper Systems, limited damage from key compromise. We need really, really sane defaults, opportunistic, transparent encryption, and resilience in even the most hairy network environment, which is mobile. So nowadays, the majority of the world is really interacting with computation via mobile phones. And it's not the case for me. I use a computer daily, maybe 10 more hours a day. But I recognized many years ago that mobile would be where the population was going, and you could tell that via any chart or graph that you looked in the world, or if you did some traveling, especially in the developing world, people just kind of skipped a step. They didn't go from no computation to a computer to mobile as many people in the West did. They went no computation to mobile, straight there. So I recognized, and I think Moxie did as well, that if you really want to make a big difference in the landscape, you had to go mobile. So there's this lock icon that we often use to show that something's secure. Well, the idea would be that this would be the default, so we don't need an icon for that. You would need an icon if the default was broken. And this is, I think, one of my favorite sayings: one-click encryption is one click too many. Okay, so that was the first, more philosophical half of the talk. I'm going to transition into the second half. And this is an animal called an axolotl. And this is the animal that our protocol is named after. They're kind of cute little aquatic animals, amphibians, and they have this property that they're very regenerative. So if one of them gets hurt or loses a limb, it just grows right back. And that's kind of what we call the feature secrecy property of our protocol, that it's self-healing. That if there's a small window of compromise or messages are dropped out of order, the protocol heals itself. So I'm going to focus, this is the protocol that we use in TextSecure, the protocol that is now running under the hood on many WhatsApp Android clients. Our roadmap at Whisper Systems is to integrate TextSecure and RedPhone into a single app on Android, which will be called Signal. It will be the same single app on iOS. Signal is already out on iOS with just the RedPhone component integrated. So Signal iOS and Signal and RedPhone Android are interoperable. In the next couple months, I think we'll finally be able to integrate the TextSecure component on the iOS side, and also hopefully in the near future upgrade the Android client so that people can just download one app. And right now that's voice and text, but ultimately that would be the app that you can use for any sort of secure communications. And I think WhatsApp, that partnership, has taught us a lot about how to scale things to the hundreds of millions of users level, and also that our strategy of kind of prototyping sane cryptographic defaults in our secure applications is really pushing big corporations such as WhatsApp, owned by Facebook, to really upgrade their cryptographic standards as well. Okay, so here's a little overview of the properties of axolotl. So it has asynchronous tolerance, missing, lost, or out of order messages are okay. It has both forward and feature secrecy properties, and it has deniability properties. How do you ask? Okay, so I have a few examples here. So it has a familiar session-based protocol setup. So you establish a shared master root secret via a triple Diffie-Hellman. Then you generate associated chain and message keys, and then you get scheman or messaging. So here is the initial setup. We have Ash and Brock, and they both have a identity key pair, and they each generate an ephemeral key pair to start out the session. And then they do an exchange of the public portions of these, and then each computes a triple or a Diffie-Hellman on a subset of this, and then in a construct called the triple Diffie-Hellman, you take a hash of this, and then you get the shared secret to start your session called the root key. And then from the most recent root key, from here, that's the initial setup. From here, everything looks the same no matter how far you are down the chain. From the most recent root key, Ash generates a new ephemeral key pair, calculates a new root key. From this, derives a chain key, and then derives a message key from the chain. So when Ash sends a message, he also sends his new ephemeral public key along with that message. So when Brock receives Ash's message, including his new ephemeral key, he can calculate the new root key and generate a new matching message key. So here, just to review, this is the initial session setup. We have the first root key. And then you can see on the right, we have the actual messaging. And on the left, we have a visualization of what's actually going on. So after that initial session is established, Ash goes ahead and calculates a chain key, then a message key, encrypts the message with that key, sends his new ephemeral key pair associated with that chain along with that message to Brock. And then he has not yet received a message, so he doesn't roll forward his root key. However, he does want to send another message, so he can derive a new chain key from that previous chain key. And by rolling that forward, that makes sure that we're never reusing message keys, even if we're sending multiple messages on the same chain, because we haven't yet gotten a response. And then when Brock receives a new, well, Ash can already calculate what the new root key would be. When Brock, yeah, he can't actually yet. So when Brock receives the message, he has the new ephemeral key. So he generates himself a new ephemeral key, calculates the new root key, and sends a message to Ash, at which point he can roll his own root key forward and parse that message. And that can just go back and forth indefinitely. So ephemeral keys are changed as fast as possible. In between ratchets, we saw if one of the two parties wants to send multiple messages, they don't reuse the same message keys, they roll the chain keys forward. It's not covered in detail here, but message loss is okay, since you can cache for some finite number of steps message keys generating, all the while ratcheting the chain forward. Okay, so that's the basic protocol in terms of the low-level technical details. In terms of the higher level, how does this actually work over a mobile network? So first, you have to register. So right now, registration is, like WhatsApp, tied to your phone number. And that's also part of the same defaults in most messaging systems that are widely adopted, such as WhatsApp and many others. iMessages nowadays, I think you can also use, I have for some of my accounts, an email address. It's a phone number that is used to verify. And what you get out of the box with that is contacts as well. You know who you can message securely out of the box. We are moving to eventually support as well general anonymous or email-based identifiers. So then with the phone number, the server sends you a challenge via an SMS or a phone call. And then the phone at registration generates a long-term identity key, which is going to be used always in that session setup, mixed in with the ephemeral keys in the triple Diffie-Hellman. It generates 100 ephemeral pre-keys and uploads these with IDs. This allows that asynchronous property, and that if you want to send me a message, you saw you needed to mix in an ephemeral key in that triple Diffie-Hellman. If I'm not online and you can't get my ephemeral key, you don't want to have to wait until I'm online in the mobile environment. So we have this concept of a pre-key in which you can upload with an identifier 100 pre-keys. And when I want to contact you, I contact the server and ask for a pre-key. And that's your public key material. So again, because it's public, I could hand it to any server, to anyone. It's designed to be public. So it does have an identifier such that if you send me a message with that pre-key, I know which private key of that key pair to use. Okay, so then I have to discover contacts. So how it actually works on RedPhone is that there's a bloom filter that is local, and no one sends their contacts to the server in any form at all. The bloom filter can be reverse engineered to get a list of users of RedPhone conceptually, but no one sends their contacts in any form to the server. We have not found a way to scale that idea to 500 million users. So what we do right now is we upload a list of hashed contact numbers, and the server keeps a hash of users, and if the hashes match at some level, then it sends back, here's the list of your contacts that are users. So the contacts are never sent in the clear to the server. That said, we are looking into, there are several blog posts about this, academic research and industry research that might scale a better way of doing this. So then the server responds back with a list of contacts registered on it, and you're ready to start messaging. So let's send a message. So the phone asks if I want to send a message to one of the members of Whisper Systems, and I haven't, for whatever reason, sent them a message yet. Maybe I'm on a test device that I've just cleared. It asks for the public key and a pre-key if one is not cached. So that's the identity key and the pre-key, which is an ephemeral key. So then the server sends that back. Then the phone itself generates that ephemeral key, does that initial session start with a triple Diffie-Hellman to derive a master secret, and then the protocol just proceeds. Messages are routed through the server, but at that point, all the encryption is already done locally. So only encrypted message buffers are passed along. The server responds with a status. Nowadays, we support delivery receipts. So like many popular messaging clients, you can actually see whether your message has been delivered, which is an element of trust with people when they're using an encrypted communication app. People are often used to the usability of these communications apps being fairly low, in that if you've ever used OTR, I've often messaged something and somehow their session was been destroyed, and I get this like giant blob of encrypted text in response, or you know the problem. So people are worried that's going to happen. So I think it is an element of trust to be able to enable it. That said, I know many people, myself included, don't necessarily want that to be the default mode of operation. So we should hopefully support both having that not be a default, but having that be an option, so that you can really trust that your message was received, decrypted, and happily seen. One of the worst usability stories that I have at Whisper Systems is that we've always had, so TextSecure on Android supports SMS and MMS. MMS is notoriously difficult to do well, and we had someone send out an announcement of the birth of their child, and the uncle didn't get the message because of some MMS decryption related issue. So that's the type of situation where maybe you want delivery receipts for trustability. If people are going to use your application to send out important announcements, which there are a lot of important events in our lives, and we hope that people use secure communications for all events, including those important events. So having that level of trust with users is important. So that's sending messages. So what about that initial exchange? So we use raw, uncut tofu. So that's trust on first use. So think SSH with that initial fingerprint notification that nobody ever uses. Like, I have never used that. Some people do use it, it is true, but I think in usability studies, even if it is used, it's not used well. So people are very bad at verifying this. So we do trust on first use. However, we do alert the user and await their approval if the public key changes. So it's trust on first use, but then it's not trust on every use after that. If the public key changes in the middle of the session, the user will be alerted and the message will not even be decrypted until the user approves, hey, your contact's information has changed, is this okay? And then you can ask and follow up on that. We do provide a UI for fingerprint verification via side channel, so it's not front and center in the app, but if you click around, you'll be able to verify fingerprints. Because of this simplification, users don't need to know what a key is. They don't need to know what a fingerprint is if they don't want to. If you do want to, unlike most people in the world, you have that option. So again, really same defaults with the opportunity to, if you want to use this very precisely and algorithmically, securely correct, you can do that as well. So what do we win? Simplification, something that looks exactly like every other messenger. And I think our WhatsApp rollout was really the epitome of this philosophy, the fact that we could silently roll out on hundreds of millions of devices our protocol without anyone noticing, getting weird encrypted text errors, etc. Something that looks just like every other messenger, which is exactly the starting point we want for encrypted messaging. Simplification allows these extremely useful but traditionally hard to use mathematical primitives to really reach the masses. And we were able to do this by starting from scratch, designing both the cryptographic and the network protocol. We get better stability and usability. So crypto on SMS is painful. That is done in the TextSecure Android world. Crypto on XMPP is also painful. Crypto on transports you don't control is painful. So this is an entire transport that's always encrypted and just works. It's a drastically simplified user experience. And a human being no longer needs to know crypto lingo to benefit from end-to-end privacy. But if they do know crypto lingo, they can even enhance that end-to-end privacy. So all these technical choices build up to a system that is really ready for mass adoption. And mass adoption is what prohibits default surveillance as a viable model. The Eves of the world are afraid of ubiquitous end-to-end encryption that isn't broken by design. And so thus, we really believe that usability issues are security issues. If you don't focus on usability, then a small portion of your community will be mathematically secure, but not even practically secure, because if only a subset of people, and you'll hear this from the Tor developers, you hear this from anyone who really wants to build a secure network, if only a subset of people are using secure messaging, then already that subset is a target. We really need many different intersecting and non-intersecting communities, all of humanity, to be using these kind of technologies so that not one group or not one person is signaled out for that. So if you code, you design. If you design, usability matters. Your software isn't usable, nobody uses it. Usable crypto fucks with the surveillance state. Thanks, from Open Whisper Systems. And as I mentioned, we're a core of 9 dedicated developers, part-time and full-time, but we also, all our technology is open source. You can check out the GitHub, mailing list, PRs, etc. So thanks.
Questions?
So I have 3 questions really. First, the short one. Do I have to stop to tell people to not use WhatsApp because it's horribly broken? Because it isn't anymore? Did I get that right?
Okay, so I would say I would still prefer if you tell people to use TextSecure, RedPhone, Signal. However, you can't really reliably do that until we launch our iOS device. That said, iOS on WhatsApp is still broken in that the encryption rollout has only been done for Android, hasn't been done for media, etc. What I can say is that looking forward to the future, even your friends that you don't manage to convince to switch will be secure whether they want to or not. So we are working to bring on WhatsApp things to iOS, things to media, etc. So still tell them to switch, but if you don't manage, they're going to be fine anyway.
All right.
We hope.
And what's the state of using TextSecure without Play services?
That is a persistent issue on the mailing list. So we have not made that a developer priority.
Okay.
That is definitely a niche, and I would say I'm probably part of that niche as well that would like to do that. I think there's a lot of engineering effort that needs to be done to distribute Android applications securely in a non-Play Store environment. The advantage with Android is if you develop an Android application, I can just host an APK on my website and you can download it. I can call it an awesome version of TextSecure, and then in the back end, put whatever I want there. And if you don't bother to compare that to the version on the Play Store, then there can be a lot of security issues there. So it hasn't been a priority for our team. There's a lot of discussion about potential models on that on the mailing list. And as always, the great thing about open source is that if someone just did this well, there's no way that we would reject that PR. We would be like, yes, it has been done, thank you. So certainly someone who wants to take that up as a challenge and dedicate the engineering effort to that, it's not that that wouldn't be appreciated, it just hasn't been a priority.
So up to now, it's still the Google Cloud messaging stuff is still required for the push services?
Yeah, that as well.
Okay.
So yeah, that's another engineering challenge as well.
And last question, are there any plans to bring the axolotl protocol to some space like email or desktop messaging, stuff like that?
So certainly here, let me bring up our team again. 2 of these developers are focused on web clients. So Lilia and Matt are working on a Chrome extension that should generalize to other web browsers. So we haven't yet focused on the desktop, but as well, part of what we've been working on in the iOS client and on the Android side is separating out the UI from the underlying crypto so that there's a general library that could then be used by many other clients. So that separation is now done fairly cleanly on the Android side, and we're working on it on the iOS side, and I'm probably at some point going to port that to C++. It's still in Objective-C, that core. And then once that's in C++, you can really use that, any developer, fairly straightforwardly without understanding, in details the edge cases of the protocol.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed the talk very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the talk and for your great work with encryption. I heard that with your integration within WhatsApp, you are not securing group chats, only one-to-one messages, and seeing that the main usage of WhatsApp is somewhat talking within groups. Is there any plan when WhatsApp will include your protocol even into the group chats?
I would say that that is already underway. It does say in our public talking points in our blog posts that that is underway. This was the first public announcement that we were able to make. So we could have made this announcement when everything was already done on the Android side or iOS side. But we're happy to be able to kind of let people know the roadmap early that this is coming to WhatsApp. So certainly that development is already underway, and I can't give an exact timeline other than that it did take several months of engineering effort to bring things just to the one-to-one communications to Android. The great thing is that we as a team, particularly Moxie, and other team members have been learning a lot about issues that we may face with the protocol at scale. So,
hey, thanks for your work. I'm really looking forward for using TextSecure on my iPhone. I have a question. Is it possible in this architecture to start typing a message or messages on the phone and then, for example, switching back to the computer and continue a conversation there? Is it possible in this architecture to switch between devices and communicating with people?
So definitely multi-account support will be there such that you can use the same account on your web client as on your phone without needing multiple sign-in. However, we haven't yet designed something that will, for example, if you want to keep track of all your message history on both devices. However, you could use the axolotl protocol. There's file attachment, encryption built in, etc., to under the hood enable all that. So there would be no protocol changes, but you could use the protocol to put that in the back end and synchronize some information. So that definitely won't be our first step in terms of usability. The first step will be just using on iOS, on Android, on the web client with a single sign-on. The second step would be to do that even more seamlessly.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. My question is actually about a very similar topic to the previous one. You told yourself that people usually replace their devices in a 1 or 2 year cycle. So how do you transfer your identity, or can you do it at all?
So this is to do. Definitely on our list is encrypted backups. It used to be enabled in our old client, and then at some point things broke in terms of just the compatibility, and we haven't yet reintegrated it. So what you would be able to do is from your old device do export and then import that in your new device. So that kind of transfer is enabled on the protocol level. It just needs to be re-implemented on the software side. So hopefully that would be back in the next.
Okay, so if I lose my phone, then all my contacts will get a scary error message about man-in-the-middle attacks.
If you lose your phone without backing that up, before you lose your phone, you could go ahead and back that up.
Okay, thanks very much.
But yeah, you're right. Our identity keys are not, the private portion at least, is not hosted anywhere publicly. So we do have as well a product called Flock that does contact synchronization and calendar synchronization securely. We envisioned that also eventually synchronizing, for example, storing in the cloud some of that encrypted backup information within our products. So definitely that would be a great feature to have, and it is sort of on our roadmap to generally support, not just for identity keys, but for example, for even your message backup, etc., which you would also lose if you lost your phone and hadn't backed it up. So that definitely is in our minds as an important thing, but we're a small team and that sort of stuff. One more question.
This one's sort of at a business level. Facebook spent a lot of money to purchase WhatsApp. How is it in their interest to make it so that they can't sell the information about traffic going across WhatsApp when that's their primary business model?
I would say I can't comment on Facebook's motivation. This was particularly with WhatsApp, and I think WhatsApp has recognized definitely globally that security and privacy are important to people. I remember I play a sport called roller derby, and my team in Zurich, my entire team, not all technical, in fact only a couple technical people on the team, the day Facebook bought WhatsApp, switched over to Threema that day. So a lot of people who are primary users of WhatsApp are recognizing this as very important. And when there aren't usable alternatives, people stick with WhatsApp. But I think WhatsApp recognizes that if there were to be a usable alternative, say TextSecure scaled up, or Silent Circle, or Threema get a lot more traction, then people would leave WhatsApp. So I think they recognize that as a legitimate threat and are heading that threat off at the pass. But that is just my personal speculation. I cannot actually comment on what WhatsApp or Facebook is thinking.
Okay. Thank you, Christine Corbett.